Hey Scott and everyone else, welcome back to 4 Running Shoes. If you caught my last video, you would have seen that I was struggling a bit with burnout and coping with that. So in the past week, I actually haven't run at all, but that's actually been really good. So I feel more energized. I have rested up a bit and pretty much haven't exercised. So I'm not feeling like amazing because of that, but it's good to have a break and I'm looking forward to getting back into exercise this week. Thanks for your last video, Scott. I enjoyed it. And yeah, it's awesome to see you getting back into your running again after injury. So I'm hoping that goes really well for you. And yeah, it was really cool to hear your past experiences with burnout as well. It was really helpful for me. And I think it's really wise to have a good re-entry strategy. And yeah, that's sort of what I'm going to be talking about today. Interestingly, this week, I actually had the opportunity to interview a psychologist to do with stress and motivation. And that was for my work to help university students to cope well with that. So yeah, it was actually really interesting for me and applied a lot to what I've been coping with burnout. Now, I'm no professional, but I thought I'd share some of the points that he brought up with you guys. And yeah, especially because that's what I'm thinking about as I try and get back into running without experiencing those burnout symptoms again. Yeah, so to simplify it down as best as I can, basically, there's two main processes that go into burnout. So one of them is how you cope with stress, and the other is where your motivation comes from and getting enough energy from your motivation sources. So to break down the stress process, basically something will happen or something you'll be required to do, something that costs energy will become a stressor for you. So that could be a lot of different things. It could be presenting something for university. It could be, your car breaking down, whatever it is. For me, this would be just how much I'm running, to be honest. I feel like that is probably the biggest stressor, how much I run in a week. Once you have this stressor that is expected of you, something you have to do or achieve, it basically has some sort of energy cost. So whenever you do something, you'll become slightly more exhausted. Obviously, it costs you energy. You need to rest and recover from that in a really helpful way in order to be able to continue doing these tasks, coping with these stressors, and then dealing with the strain. So for me, the stressor is running a certain amount of mileage in the week, and then the strain is actually, sacrificing that time to go out for the run. It's also, the energy cost, feeling tired or having to eat more, rest more, a lot of those sort of things that will just sap energy from me throughout the week. And there's actually a third process to this stress process, because it's not as simple as you do a certain thing and then everybody will experience a certain amount of strain from that. It's pretty similar for some things, like especially physical exercise, but there's actually a lens that people view certain things in. Like for someone who, maybe there's two different people and they're both actually pretty fit, same fitness level, but if they were both to think, okay, I have to run 50 kilometers in a week, one might process that as, oh, that's really easy. I do that, no worries, and it's something I do every week, so it doesn't matter. But the other person might think, oh man, 50 kilometers, that's a lot of time, that's a lot of effort, it's gonna cost a lot of energy. Oh, that could actually be a really big strain in my life, and I could struggle with that. So this lens actually has an extra cost to it sometimes. If you're not having a good mindset going into these stressors, you can actually cause a lot more strain than you would normally just if you had to do the actual assignment. So, and sometimes you actually reinterpret this stress and it can become a bit of a spiral, like, oh, I have to run this 50 kilometers, otherwise I'm going to miss this goal. And if I miss this goal, I might not be as fit as I want to be. And if I don't get fit, maybe, I could, struggle with other elements of my life and not get the marks at school. That, like, it could even interact with other aspects of your life and become a much bigger deal than it originally was. So it's important that you think about all three of these different areas. And that's what I'm thinking about my running. Where is the struggle with doing the certain mileage, the stressor that I'm trying to do in a week? So now moving on to motivation. Motivation is just as simple as, do you have the resources to cope with this strain or this stressor in your life? These resources could be a lot of different things. It could be just having a good plan to motivate yourself and feel like you've got enough time and schedule in your runs. It could be having good pair of running shoes. It could be having someone keeping you accountable like you, Scott. It could be a lot of different things, but all these things going together will actually give you more motivation and ability to accomplish the task or cope with the stressor, see it well, and be able to cope with the strain in a really positive way to help you achieve your goals. So it can be helpful to think, what are ways that I can find extra resources in my life to help motivate me to get this stressor done, this strain coped with, to actually do well in this area that I'm trying to see change in. This is the part that I'm actually really interested in. So basically, it's not about minimizing the stress or strain or just maximizing your resources. Those are both good things. But yeah, stress is actually something that's important. Like, we put ourselves in stressful situations so that we grow. Like, that's a lot about running. It's not necessarily a pleasurable thing to do, but we see benefit in it. We want to grow in it. So that's something that we want to actually put time and effort and energy into. How to manage it well, though, is to actually balance these two things. So to have a good level of stress and things that are actually important to you to be your stressors, things that you want to see change in, and then have a good level of resources and motivation to be able to manage it well. So if those things are matched up well, you're actually going to see a lot of positive change in your life and work towards those goals. But if there's imbalance between these two areas, it can actually be a really unhealthy thing. Like, these stressors can become a drain on you, and yeah, you won't see the goals become a reality. Burnout itself, which is what we're talking about, which is basically when the stressors or the strain is too much for you to cope with, it's too difficult, and you don't have the resources to cope with that. So that's pretty much the worst of both situations. The stressors are too high and your motivation or your resources to cope with that are too low. So you ultimately end up losing a lot of energy, and that doesn't get replenished quick enough. And so you will gradually dip and dip and dip until your energy is just really low, and it actually impacts a lot of different areas in your life. What does this mean for me? So I was expecting too much of myself, running really high mileage and trying to reach that 2,000 kilometer goal for this year. I think it was just too unrealistic. So to see change in that, I was thinking about some different options, but basically I could impact the strain itself, the stressor, or I could impact the resources, and I'll try and do both. So back to that process, there's stressor, strain, and then how I view the stressor. So I think the stressor itself, running 50 kilometers in a week or going for that really high mileage, is too unrealistic for me. So I'm actually gonna say that's not a realistic or helpful stressor to put on myself. And I think pulling that back and slowly working that up again is actually gonna see a lot of renewed energy and motivation in my life. It's going to be a lot easier to maintain, and the slow increase in mileage is actually going to be really helpful for me in minimizing those stress, the strain that I was feeling from that. I can also think about impacting or changing the strain or dealing with that better, which is kind of helpful, but basically I'm just feeling tired or low energy. Also feel like there's a lot of time in the week that I'm missing out on doing, like, running. So I think some things that I could do to fix that is just making sure I'm planning that well, also resting, recovering well, eating well. That's all going to be stuff that's going to help me cope with the strain better. And then that lens in the middle, that's actually something I probably struggled with a bit. Just making things feel a lot harder than they actually are. I blow up the distance in my mind a lot, think, oh man, an 8-kilometer run is so hard right now. It's the worst sort of thing. And then it starts raining, and then it gets cold, and it just, my perception on the actual stressor of going for that 8-kilometer run is a lot worse than it actually is. So I think pulling back my mileage is gonna help me to build up to realizing, oh yeah, 8 kilometers is easy. Like, I can just go do that, no worries. At the moment, I feel like a 5-kilometer run or even less than a 5-kilometer run is super easy. So I think I've found in the past that as I gradually build up to longer distances, I am more mentally prepared and willing to be like, oh yeah, 8 kilometers isn't that far, 10 kilometers isn't that far. Whereas before I'd be like, oh man, or at the moment I'm struggling to comprehend that distance and force myself out the door to go for that run. And now moving on to the motivation and resources side, I am thinking I can find resources in scheduling my time better. Often I'll delay a run because I don't feel like going, and then all of a sudden it's 9 p.m. at night, and I'm like, okay, this is the last chance, I have to go. And then all of a sudden it's 9:20, and I'm like, it's probably too late now, and then I miss a run. So scheduling in my run into my routine, or just fitting it in and having a specific time that I go, I think that's going to be really helpful. Another thing that will be really helpful is freeing up more time and feeling like I have the time and the space in my day to do it. Because at the moment, I've been doing a lot of workouts, which is at least half an hour a day of other exercise that I'm fitting in, but usually more with stretching and other things that I've been doing. So it's become a bit of an issue where I'm just spending a lot of time exercising, and I'm feeling like it's taking up a lot of my life, and that makes it a lot more difficult to get out and do the run, which is what I'm actually more focused on doing, even though the workout itself is an easier exercise to do, so I feel good doing that, but it's taking away from my time where I could be running. So that'll increase resources in my personal time to exercise. So that's what I'm thinking about as I go into this next week, and I'm hoping that it'll give me more motivation and the strain on my life isn't going to be as big as it has been before, so that I'm not depleting energy week by week, but I'm actually able to sustain it, even like gain energy as I go, as I get used to running higher mileages. So this week I'm going to run 20 kilometers and then see how I go with that, manage myself, slow increase in mileage, and see what happens week by week. But thanks for watching. Thank you for joining us in this journey. And as we both are getting back into our running routine, yeah, it's really helpful to have you guys encouraging us. And yeah, leave a comment if this is helpful for you and inspiring you. And yeah, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Check out Scott's on Tuesday, and have a good week.